My name is Francesca Puledda, and I'm a neurologist and headache researcher at King's College London. And I'm really glad to have this opportunity to talk to you about some tips and tricks that I've learned throughout the last few years about writing a bulletproof research grant. And as chair of the International Headache Society Junior Group, I would really like to also use this platform to have the opportunity to share with you some of the exciting funding opportunities that the IHS offers for young researchers interested in headache. So this is what I'm going to talk to you about. We're going to start off talking about what makes a good grant application. Then we're going to move on to the concept of the 3 Ps, which are person, project, place, and how having a good balance in your application through these 3 concepts will really allow you to have a well-rounded proposal overall. We're going to look into some common mistakes in grant writing and how we can overcome those and increase our chances of being funded. And then finally, we're going to look at the current International Headache Society opportunities for young junior researchers. So first of all, what makes a good grant application? Well, of course, all of the things that are written on the right-hand side, I've definitely thought all of them when writing an application. But I think most importantly, the key strategy is to have a very clear research idea. And this research idea needs to be innovative. It needs to really bring value and advance the field that you're interested in. But it also needs to be within the remit of the funders. This means that every funding body will have a specific set of aims, of scopes, a remit, and they will make this usually very, very clear. And you need to be sure that your research idea is aligned with that. And another very important aspect of grant and fellowship application is having an applicant, a proposer yourself, who has the right skills to deliver the research and that will actually also benefit from the experience of the project. In fact, funders know very well that science isn't done by a single research project. That's not how science is advanced. We all know that as researchers. So they want to know that they're funding the person that will most likely stay in the field and even in a longer amount of time that is limited to the research project, so that they have a higher probability of really making changes to that area. Another really important aspect of a good grant application is a proposal that is well written throughout. It needs to be really nice to read. It has to have a coherent style. It also has to have a good proportion between background, objectives, and methodologies. So obviously, usually as clinician scientists or as basic scientists, we're very much used to writing scientific papers. And when writing grant applications, we need to know that we need to leave a little bit of that behind and move away from that, particularly from the scientific third person, because we will often be writing about ourselves, and we will get into that in a moment. But also we will be writing very little, for example, background, because we will assume that the person who reads it is knowledgeable on the topic, and they will want to know what's innovative in the project, not what has already been done. And a good grant application is really a pleasure to read. You want to captivate your audience, which in this case are the reviewers, and you want to make it worth their while. And also a good application, I think, needs to show a really good balance between what is ambitious, what will make a breakthrough and a distinction between with the previous literature, but it also needs to be feasible. It needs to be doable within the time frame that is proposed and within the funds that are being offered. Otherwise, it needs to be very clear that if those funds are not sufficient, that has been taken into account, it has been calculated, and that there will be other sources throughout the project itself. So moving on to the concept of the 3 Ps. Now, this is a really important set of concepts that I think are being more and more used by large funding bodies, particularly in the UK and Europe, to evaluate proposals. And they basically reflect the balance that you want to have in your application between different aspects. So not just the project, which definitely as scientists, we are most inclined into using a lot of time on, but also highlighting what is very important about the person and the place. And just to go into a little bit more detail of that, as I was saying before, the funders of a funding body want to know that they are putting their money not just on a single project, but on a person that is likely to pursue a career in their field or in that specific field. So you want to show through your application how you really envision your academic and clinical career pathway. And you want to also really underline how this specific grant or fellowship that you're applying for will allow for that career progression. And sometimes it might be very useful. So this might not necessarily apply to very, very junior scientists who are at the start of their career, but it might be interesting to show that you have ownership of the proposal of the ideas. It might not be the case that the idea is entirely yours. It's absolutely fine if it has been developed with the help of your supervisor, sometimes almost entirely by your supervisors or mentors. But in that case, you want to show that you have ownership, at least of understanding why the proposal is so important and really making that come across in your proposal. And also, you want to be able to show why you're the right person to deliver this project, why you might have that unique set of skills that will allow to enable the science throughout. And if you don't have the skills that are necessary, how this fellowship or this grant will allow you to acquire those skills through a specific training element, how that is going to improve you as a scientist, as a clinician, or even how you found the best, how you created the best team of mentors or supervisors, of collaborators that will enable you to bring that science forward. With regards to the project, this is definitely possibly the most interesting part to write, as I said, the one that we tend to focus most on, but it can also be the hardest one. And I think there are some strategies to make this process a little bit easier if possible. I think one of the main thing about a really good written project is to highlight your research questions very, very clearly at the start of your application. As I said before, you want to captivate your reviewer. You want to have them on the same page as you, make them understand what you want to achieve with this project. And so you will need to state very clear aims that are hypothesis driven that will enable you to answer those research questions that you've asked yourself. And it might be a very good strategy. You might not want to do this, but a tip that I have found useful is to perhaps enumerate your research questions and your hypotheses with specific numbers or symbols or letters, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, and link to those to the methodologies you will be using in your project. So say, for example, you're interested in doing an imaging project on patients with aura. You're looking through magnetic resonance spectroscopy at the metabolism, brain metabolism of patients with aura. So that's your first methodology, and it will be methodology number one will enable you to answer the research question, what are the differences in, for example, occipital lobe metabolism of patients with aura respect to migraineurs without aura. And that will be your hypothesis is that it will be different. It will be different in these ways. And then you might also hypothesize that these changes in metabolism and brain metabolism will change throughout the migraine cycle because you've studied the literature and you know that this is what we're starting to understand of the migrainous brain is that it's a cyclical disorder, a very complex cyclical disorder. And so you might want to look at that with a second methodology, for example, a longitudinal study, a repetition of your spectroscopy or even functional spectroscopy throughout the month. So that will be methodology B, which answers research question B with aim B. So that will really allow the reader and the reviewer to understand what your project is about and why it's so important. It will really allow you to show that it's focused and that it's an original approach. And you will also want to highlight how you got to the rationale of that project, and if you've analyzed any feasibility issues, all the risks that might come with your proposal, and if you have mitigating plans, plan B or or C, if something goes wrong throughout the project, which is very likely to happen, you want to show that you have thought of optional strategies. For example, if you can't recruit enough patients, if you have a mitigating plan for that. And it might also be very important if you've had the opportunity to do this to show that you have preliminary data, because that really reduces the risk of a project being feasible. And finally, the place. This is, again, often overlooked, but it is a very important theme in a project proposal to show that you have a research environment, or that you've looked for a research environment because you might be moving for a project that really enables you to deliver the science, that you have the right facilities, you might have a good idea, but you don't have the right methodology, or you don't have the skills. So if you don't, you need to find collaborators that will help you with that, or even the right mentors or supervisors who have the right knowledge for your topic. And you want to show and demonstrate how your host institute, again, this might be a new institute respect to your the one where you come from, is able to support you, if you will have access to resources and the right networks, and if you will have the right training and, again, development opportunities that will allow you to grow as a clinician, as a researcher throughout the project. And you might, again, want to highlight the collaborations, particularly if you've created new collaborations, especially in international societies like the IHS, but several others as well. It is really important to create collaborations across different centers, because this is really ultimately what enables the progression of science, people replicating studies from everywhere in the world. And that really allows us to understand much more about the diseases that we're studying. And if you've done that, you need to really show that in your proposal. So again, make it very much about yourself. And I know how hard that can be. We're not used to talking about ourselves as individual, but when you are selling a proposal, it will need to be very personal and very individual, because you will be competing with other excellent proposals, and it needs to be unique. So these are a list of, I think, common mistakes that I've definitely done myself, but that I've also encountered sometimes on the other side when reviewing project proposals. And some are more difficult to overcome. Some, however, can be changed even relatively easily if we know what to focus on. So a big one, of course, is when the aim and questions of a proposal are really not clear and focused. This is a difficult one to correct just in a few days. And it's the reason why we need to start thinking about our projects well before we actually start writing them and putting them into a proposal. So this is just simply a task that requires, unfortunately, a lot of time, as I will get to in the next slide as well. And another very common, unfortunately, problem that is also difficult to correct is when the topic is simply not innovative. A lot of research proposals are struck down simply because they don't add enough to the current field. They don't have a lot of value, or even, as I said before, they don't really fit. They're not of interest to the specific funders that you're applying to. But very often, we find research proposals that are really good. The idea especially is good. The aims are clear, but perhaps the proposal itself lacks some detail throughout and would simply benefit from a review from a more senior academic. This doesn't necessarily need to be a very senior person. It can be a review from someone who has more experience, for example, in writing this type of proposal, which, as I said, is very, very different from thesis writing or manuscript writing. So this is a mistake that I've encountered very, very often, and I will get to that again as well, and how we can correct that. And another big one very common, unfortunately, is structural problems. So this can go from syntax errors to grammar errors. And I know obviously, how big a barrier language can be. And if you think that is the case for yourself, I would really suggest getting a revision from a native speaker if possible. But an easy one that you can correct is definitely typos. As a reviewer, you want to have an excuse to strike down a proposal because, again, you will have several to review and they will most likely all be very good. Typos is just an example that shows that you haven't really put enough thought, enough attention into your project. So why would I really agree to sponsor it if you've not even been able to sell it properly to me? Just trying to kind of put yourself in the mind of the reviewer. Again, another common problem is that it doesn't follow the call. So you might be asked to provide a specific set of documents or write a right number of words. Really try to follow those instructions really carefully and in detail. And you might, for example, want to remember that you shouldn't be excessive in writing background about the topic, but you will want to focus on your aims, on your methodology. And again, a common problem is feasibility issues. It can become very clear in a proposal that there simply isn't enough time to reach those aims, or the applicant doesn't have the capacity or the skills to go through with them. And so now that we kind of know what the perhaps most common mistakes are in writing a research grant, how can we increase our chances of being funded? Well, I think there are a few tips that I want to give you, but the most important one is the first one, and all the others really depend on it. And unfortunately, there is no way around this. Writing a good proposal, writing a good grant will take a lot of time. And absolutely, as a clinician scientist, I know how difficult this can be. Often we're busy with shifts, with rounds, with training, with teaching, we have to cut time from family and your personal time, the weekends. It might be the case. Unfortunately, it can be very painful, but there is no way around it. The more time you dedicate to a project, the more likely you are to be successful. And this is because simply it is a very hard task. And of course, this time will be proportionate to the length of the fellowship or the grant and the amount of funding that you're requesting. It will be very different if you're looking for a project for 6 months respect to 8 years, but still it will be in proportion what feels like a large amount of time. If you feel like you've done it breezily, you've probably not dedicated enough time to it. And a really important suggestion that I want to give you, and as a junior researcher myself, I often struggled with this, and I find my friends and colleagues also struggling, is the one of asking for help. I think as juniors, we always feel a little bit in debt towards other academics, and we find that we cannot borrow too much of their time. But sometimes we would be surprised in how helpful other colleagues can be. It might be the case of asking people that are not necessarily in your team or even in your field, because research proposals, unlike manuscripts, will often be reviewed by people who are not necessarily completely knowledgeable in that topic, but they will be even sometimes lay people or skilled academics in a totally different field. So it will be useful to ask for help for someone who's experienced, but even not necessarily knows a lot about what your project is about. They will still be able to spot problems and mistakes and improve your proposal. And in this context, I really urge you to do a lot of repetitions and iterations. This means that the more time you look at your proposal and the more people look at it from outside, the more likely it is you will be able to spot errors and areas of improvement. And this really goes with the next suggestion, which is to look and focus into the detail. Again, you don't want to find obviously small mistakes like typos, but even just small errors that show that you haven't really thought through the whole process, the whole project. And again, you need to be selling this proposal, so you need to really know that show that everything has been thought through from beginning to end. And in this context, it's also very important to do your homework. You will not, especially if you're applying for several different funding opportunities, each one will be unique. Each one will be looking for different things, and you will not be able to know everything about them. So it is a good idea to approach the funders, the bodies, or even people who have been a successful applicant in previous calls. They will have gone through that process of review. They will be able to tell you what the reviewers are looking for and what are common mistakes that they might have done. So doing your homework, again, this will take, all of these things, as you can see, will take a lot of time, but they will be really useful in improving your proposal. So now that we've gone through what could be some suggestions of improving your chances of writing a really good research grant, I want to walk you through some of the exciting opportunities that IHS has to offer to junior researchers and scientists that are interested in the headache field. And I really urge you to look in the IHS website very often, because aside from educational content, there's a lot of opportunities. That the website gets constantly updated, and you will find throughout the year that these change, that the calls open in different moments. So perhaps our most prestigious funding opportunity is the IHS Fellowship. This is an award that funds a body of research that is undertaken over the course of 1 year, and it's funded up to £50,000, and it's dedicated to researchers that are within 6 years of their last training, and it really has the scope of funding really important research projects that are dedicated to advancing the field of headache, and is dedicated both to basic and clinical scientists. In fact, basic scientists are often extremely successful with this fellowship opportunity, and every year we have different possibilities. In 2022 we had only one fellowship, but for example 2021 we were able to fund 3 different fellowships. And usually this also implies moving to a different center that is not necessarily your host institution. And another really exciting IHS opportunity is the Headache Trainees Program. This is an exclusively clinical program. It's dedicated to young neurologists and neurology trainees that come from low, lower middle, or upper middle income countries. And they are allowed the possibility to visit an international renowned headache center of their choice, of course, with the agreement of the host institution, for up to 3 months. And for example, very recently, we've hosted a very successful trainee in our center at King's College London, but there are a lot of these trainees that you can speak to if you want to hear about their experiences, which usually are very, very positive and exciting. There's a lot to bring home and a lot to learn in these occasions. And the junior group of the International Headache Society has usually been very active, particularly around the International Headache Congress. However, of course, with the pandemic, we had to expand our activities a little beyond that, since everything was put on hold, of course. And so we decided to launch some new projects that we're very, very proud of, and that we think will be helpful for young trainees and juniors around the world. And one of them is the virtual mentoring program. We've launched this last year, and it will be ongoing this year as well. And it's a project that aims at promoting global mentorship and collaborations and support within the International Headache Society. And the way it's done is that mentors and mentees who have shown an interest in the project are paired, and they are, we ask them to meet a minimum of 3 times in a year, but often this is a bit more depending on availability. And they can have conversations on very broad aspects of career improvement, but also very specific forms of training, such as the example here of Marco, who is a former member of our junior group as well. And he was able to train his mentee on some very complex techniques of, for example, of neuroimaging. He taught SPM, statistical parametric mapping, and other softwares, which have been very, very useful for his mentee to kind of progress his research career. And I would tell you to watch this space because the virtual mentoring program, we're hoping to launch a little spin-off that will involve an in-person tutoring of a short amount of time in the Headache Center at the end of the mentoring program. So if you are interested, I would definitely urge you to watch this space. And another important project that the junior group has launched in 2021 and has been confirmed for the following years as well is the junior research grants. These are grants of 10,000 euros that sponsor research that, of course, is done in the headache field from basic and clinical science for young juniors that will usually undertake a body of work in a different institution, although this is not compulsory. And the awardees of this grant then have the opportunity of showing and talking about their research in a short oral presentation in the International Headache Congress. And also, one of the grants every year is always dedicated to a member of a low, lower middle, or upper middle income country. So a very exciting opportunity. And finally, moving on to the activities of IHC, which of course, as the Korean Headache Society will be particularly interested in for this year. The main junior activity has probably been, if you've been to previous IHC, you will definitely be familiar with this, is the Headache Trainees Excellence Tournament. This is a very popular activity that allows a platform for junior members of IHS to showcase their research and to compete with their peers for very exciting prizes. But aside from the competition, it's a great chance to really work on your presentation skills and also to hear about exciting research from juniors from all over the world. And usually we have 3 presentations from basic science background and 3 from a clinical science background. And the junior group is also directly involved in the awarding the poster prizes for the best posters in the International Headache Congress. And of course, there's also social activities that we promote and that you will see in the next IHC, certainly. There is the Juniors Forum, which is open to all juniors from everywhere in the world. And this gives everyone the opportunity to be involved in our group and to ask questions and suggest improvements and give us suggestions of what their views should be of how we should promote the activities and the careers of juniors around the world. And then this is always followed by a very, very nice social event that is always very well attended. And there is obviously the very popular soccer match at IHC that involves juniors and seniors. And this year in Seoul, we will probably be launching a new sports activity as well. So stay tuned. And this will not be of interest, perhaps, for 2023 IHC, but in the future, it will be useful for you to know that the juniors offer travel grants for junior IHS members to travel to IHC and for accommodation as well. And also, there's the possibility of having a short stay scholarship, usually in the area where the Congress is being held, but this is not necessarily limited to that specific region. So excellent opportunities to travel to important headache centers. So I hope this was useful for you, and I really thank you for your attention. And I think we have the opportunities for some Q&A. So if you do have any questions, I would urge you to ask them or email me in the future. Also, if I can be of help for any grant proposals, I would be very glad to do that. And again, I would urge you to look at the educational activities in the IHS website because there are plenty of things that are being offered. Thank you very much. And I hope to see you very soon in Seoul in 2023.